Dr. Kildare. Dr. James Kildare is a fictional American medical doctor, originally created in the 1930s by the author Frederick Schiller Faust under the pen name Max Brand. Shortly after the character's first appearance in a magazine story, Paramount Pictures used the story and character as the basis for the 1937 film Internes Can't Take Money, starring Joel McCrea as Jimmie Kildare. Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer MGM subsequently acquired the rights and featured Kildare as the primary character in a series of American theatrical films in the late 1930s and early 1940s. Several of these films were co-written by Faust as Max Brand, who also continued to write magazine stories and novels about the character until the early 1940s. Kildare was portrayed by Lew Ayres in 9 MGM films. Ayres was drafted in 1942 and served as a non-combatant medic until 1946. Later films set in the same hospital featured Dr. Gillespie, Lionel Barrymore. Ayres returned to voice the Kildare character in an early 1950s radio series. The 1961-1966 Dr. Kildare television series made a star of Richard Chamberlain and gave birth to a comic book and comic strip based on the show. A short-lived reboot of the TV series, Young Dr. Kildare, debuted in 1972 and ran for 24 episodes. Magazine stories and novels. Original series. The author Frederick Schiller Faust, writing as Max Brand, created the character of Dr. James Kildare as a fictionalized version of his college friend, Dr. George Winthrop Dixie Fish, a New York surgeon. He first introduced the character in a short story, Internes Can't Take Money, that appeared in the March 1936 issue of Cosmopolitan magazine. A second Kildare story, Whiskey Sour, was published in Cosmopolitan in April 1938. In these early stories, Dr. James Jimmie Kildare is an aspiring surgeon who leaves his parents' farm to practice at a fictional big city hospital, and through his work comes into contact with underworld criminals. The first Kildare film, Internes Can't Take Money 1937, based on the short story of the same title and made by Paramount, followed this version of the character. In 1938, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer MGM contracted with Faust to acquire the rights to the Kildare character, along with Faust's services as a film story writer. Faust then made major changes to the character to fit MGM idea for a new movie series, including changing Kildare's specialty to diagnostics rather than surgery, introducing the character of Kildare's superior Dr. Leonard Gillespie, de-emphasizing the criminal elements and restarting the story from Kildare's first arrival at the city hospital. Faust as Brand collaborated with MGM on its Kildare film series starting with the first MGM series release, Young Dr. Kildare 1938, and continuing through The People vs. Dr. Kildare 1941. During this time, Faust wrote several original Kildare stories which were first published in magazines, later republished in novel form, and made into films by MGM. The stories were written prior to the films being made and were not published as movie tie-ins. After The People vs. Dr. Kildare, Faust and MGM parted ways. Faust was not involved in Dr. Kildare's Wedding Day, Dr. Kildare's Victory, or any of the subsequent films featuring Dr. Gillespie, although Faust as Brand continued to receive a credit for creating the characters. Faust's last two Kildare stories, Dr. Kildare's Hardest Case published in 1942 and The Unfinished Story, Dr. Kildare's Dilemma posthumously published in the early 1970s, were not made into films. In 1944, Faust was killed in Italy while working as a war correspondent. Dr. Kildare story list. This table lists the Max Brand authored Kildare stories in chronological order of first publication. Due to the continuing popularity of the characters in film, radio, and television series, many reprints, different formats, and different versions of the original Kildare books have since been released. Aside from the Kildare stories, Faust as Brand wrote only one other medical story, My People, which appeared in the August 1940 issue of Cosmopolitan. My People featured a character, Dr. Maynard, who was similar to Dr. Kildare. MGM acquired the rights to My People as a possible concept for a Kildare film, but it was never developed. Television tie-ins. The popularity of the 1960s Dr. Kildare TV series and its star, Richard Chamberlain, resulted in a number of contemporary tie-in novels by several different authors. Several were released in mass-market paperback form by Lancer Books, while titles aimed at preteen and young teen readers were published by Whitman Publishing. The covers featured photographs of Chamberlain as Kildare or artwork using his likeness. Known titles are listed below. By Robert C. Eckworth, Dr. Kildare Lancer, 1962. Dr. Kildare, Assigned to Trouble Whitman, 1963, with Robert L. Jenney, illustrator by Norman A. Daniels. Dr. Kildare's Secret Romance Lancer, 1962. Dr. Kildare's Finest Hour Lancer, 1963, by William Johnston. Dr. Kildare, The Faces of Love Lancer, 1963. Dr. Kildare, The Heart Has an Answer Lancer, 1963. Dr. Kildare, The Magic Key Whitman, 1964, with Al Anderson, illustrator. Films. Internes Can't Take Money. The character of Dr. Kildare first appeared on film in the 1937 Paramount film Internes Can't Take Money, based on Max Brand's previously published short story of the same name and starring Joel McCrea as Dr. Kildare. The plot focuses on Dr. Kildare's attempt to help a young female ex-convict played by Barbara Stanwyck locate her child. Paramount did not plan any further Kildare films, probably because box office returns did not meet expectations. MGM film series 1930s-1940s. MGM had noted the popularity of the Kildare character in pulp magazines, and following the release of Internes Can't Take Money, saw an opportunity to obtain an undervalued property and develop a successful film series. In 1938, MGM entered into a deal with author Faust Brand to acquire the rights to Dr. Kildare and have Faust work with MGM on developing stories for a film series. 7 Dr. Kildare films were subsequently made by MGM based on stories originally written by Faust. After The People vs. Dr. Kildare 1941, Faust and MGM ended their collaboration, and MGM continued the series using stories by other writers, though Faust still received a credit for creating the characters. In the MGM series, the Dr. Kildare character played by Lew Ayres first appears as a medical intern newly arrived at a New York City hospital, where he attracts the attention of a respected older physician and skilled diagnostician, Dr. Leonard Gillespie, played by Lionel Barrymore. After becoming a physician, Kildare faces a number of professional and personal challenges in the course of his work while being mentored by Gillespie. In 1942, during the making of the 10th film in the MGM series, originally titled Born to be Bad, Ayres was drafted to serve in WW2 and declared himself a conscientious objector. The resulting negative publicity caused MGM to cut Ayres from the film, eliminate the character of Kildare, and change the film's focus to Barrymore's character Gillespie, eventually releasing the revamped film as Calling Dr. Gillespie 1942. Dr. Kildare simply vanished from the series without explanation, and for Calling Dr. Gillespie, the character of a young doctor mentored by the experienced Dr. Gillespie was played by Philip Dorn as Dr. John Hunter Jernid. MGM made several more films featuring the Dr. Gillespie character, mentoring various young doctors played by Van Johnson as Dr. Randall Red Adams, Hee Luke as Dr. Lee Won Howe, and James Craig as Dr. Tommy Colt. After leaving the series, the character of Kildare was never seen, heard, or so much as mentioned in any of the subsequent films. MGM Dr. Kildare films. Young Dr. Kildare 1938, which introduced Lew Ayres as Dr. Kildare and Lionel Barrymore as Dr. Gillespie. Calling Dr. Kildare 1939. The Secret of Dr. Kildare 1939. Dr. Kildare's Strange Case 1940. 40, teen 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 40. Dr. Kildare Goes Home 1940. Dr. Kildare's Crisis 1940, he 40, he 40. The People vs. Dr. Kildare 1940 won the last film made with the collaboration of series creator Frederick Schiller Faust Max Brand. Dr. Kildare's Wedding Day 1941. Dr. Kildare's Victory 1942. MGM Dr. Gillespie Films. Calling Dr. Gillespie 1942. With Dr. John Hunter Jernit Philip Jorn replacing the character of Dr. Lew Ayres, who was retired from the series. Dr. Gillespie's New Assistant 1942, which introduced Gillespie's new assistants Dr. Randall Red Adams Van Johnson and Dr. Lee Won How Ki Luke. Dr. Gillespie's Criminal Case 1943, with Dr. Randall Red Adams Johnson and Dr. Lee Won How Luke. Three Men in White 1944, with Dr. Randall Red Adams Johnson and Dr. Lee Won How Luke. Between Two Women 1945, with Dr. Randall Red Adams Johnson and Dr. Lee Won How Luke. Dark Delusion 1947, with Dr. Tommy Cole James Craig replacing Johnson's character and Dr. Lee Won How Luke. Home Media. Warner Bros. Released the complete set of MGM Kildare films on DVD as the Dr. Kildare Movie Collection via their Warner Archive collection in January 2014. The set also included, as an extra, the 1960 unaired pilot for the Dr. Kildare TV series starring Lew Ayres. Previously, some of the individual Kildare films had been released individually on DVD through distributors such as Alpha Video, Roan Archival Group, Film Rise, and Genius Entertainment. Warner Bros. Also released the complete set of Dr. Gillespie films on DVD as the Dr. Gillespie Movie Collection via Warner Archive Collection in November 2014. The single Paramount Kildare film, Internes Can't Take Money, was released on DVD by Universal as part of the Barbara Stanwyck Collection in April 2010. Radio. The Kildare character first appeared on radio on October 13, 1938, when Lionel Barrymore and Lew Ayres performed a scene from their soon-to-be-released film, Young Dr. Kildare, on MGM Good News of 1939 radio program. In the summer of 1949, MGM reunited Lew Ayres and Lionel Barrymore to record the radio series, The Story of Dr. Kildare, which used the concept and characters of the earlier Young Dr. Kildare story and did not include any of the young doctors who had replaced Kildare in the later films featuring Dr. Gillespie. By this time, Ayres had returned to public favor after serving in WW2 as a medical corpsman. Episodes were scripted by James Moser, Gene Holloway, Les Crutchfield, E. Jack Newman, John Michael Hayes, Joel McCrea, and others. The supporting cast included Ted Osborne as hospital administrator Dr. Care, Eleanor Audley as receptionist Molly Byde, Jane Webb as nurse Mary Lamont, and Virginia Gregg as nurse Evangeline Parker, labeled Nosy Parker by Gillespie. In addition, many prominent West Coast radio actors made recurring appearances, including Raymond Burr, William Conrad, Stacey Harris, Lorene Tuttle, Barton Yarborough, and Jack Webb. Each radio episode was developed as a stand-alone program rather than a serial. Episodes typically focused on Dr. Kildare dealing with a particular medical issue while jousting with eccentric patients and or hospital administrators. The medical information presented was up to date for its time and sometimes taken from real life. For example, an episode in which Dr. Kildare is forced to perform an emergency appendectomy on himself was based on a news story. At least 60 half-hour episodes were produced. In addition to airing on the MGM-affiliated New York station WMGM, the story of Dr. Kildare was originally syndicated to over 200 outlets in the U.S. and Canada, mostly mutual broadcasting system stations. The earliest known broadcast of the program took place on September 27, 1949, on mutual station WGN in Chicago, prior to the WMGM premiere episode on October 12, 1949. In the early 1950s, MGM offered the show to stations as part of a multiple program package for a price lower than purchasing each program individually. However, starting in 1952, stations began to lose interest in such packages, preferring to develop their own local programming to better compete with television. Consequently, despite the show's popularity with audiences, no new episodes of the story of Dr. Kildare were produced after 1951, although rebroadcasts of old episodes continued to air in syndication for several more years. Television. Dr. Kildare 1950s. In 1953, Lew Ayres was approached to play Dr. Kildare in a television series, which would feature Dr. Kildare having finally taken over the practice of a retired Dr. Gillespie. After 2 pilots were filmed, Ayres refused to work further on the project unless the television studio refused to allow cigarette companies to sponsor the program. Ayres later explained, "My feeling was that a medical show, particularly one that might appeal to children, should not be used to sell cigarettes." The studio would not agree to reject lucrative advertising, so the project was abandoned. Dr. Kildare 1960s. A second attempt at a television series was made in the early 1960s with Dr. Kildare, a NBC medical drama television series starring Richard Chamberlain in the title role, produced by MGM Television and inspired by the original Dr. Kildare stories and films. Lew Ayres appeared as Dr. Gillespie in a 1960 unsold and unaired pilot with Joseph Cronin as Kildare, but Raymond Massey was cast as Gillespie in the version that finally went to air. Premiering on September 28, 1961, the series was a top-10 hit with audiences and ran until April 5, 1966, for a total of 191 episodes in 5 seasons. The first 2 seasons told the story of Dr. James Kildare Chamberlain, working in a fictional large metropolitan hospital while trying to learn his profession, deal with his patients' problems, and earn the respect of the senior Dr. Leonard Gillespie Massey. In the 3rd season, Dr. Kildare was promoted to resident and the series began to focus more on the stories of the patients and their families. The success of the show, along with ABC contemporaneous medical drama Ben Casey, inspired the launch of numerous other television medical dramas in the ensuing years. Young Dr. Kildare 1970s. In 1972, MGM Television created a short-lived syndicated drama series called Young Dr. Kildare, starring Mark Jenkins as Dr. James Kildare and Gary Merrill as Dr. Leonard Gillespie. The series was not a success, and only 24 episodes were produced. Comics. From 1962 to 1965, Dell Comics published a Dr. Kildare comic book based on the 1960s Dr. Kildare television series. The first issue was released April 2, 1962, as known, 1337 in Dell's 4-color comics line, and featured a story involving a gambler checking into Dr. Kildare's hospital to hide from a hit man. Dell subsequently continued the comic book for a total of 9 issues, with the final issue appearing in April 1965. All issues had photo covers featuring Chamberlain, the star of the TV series. A Dr. Kildare daily comic strip based on the 1960s television series, distributed by King Features Syndicate and drawn by Ken Bald, also premiered on October 15, 1962. Bald was required to base his drawing of Dr. Kildare on photos of Richard Chamberlain, but made up his own drawings of other characters, including Dr. Gillespie. The daily strip, drawn by Bald, ran for over 2 decades until April 21, 1984, outlasting the television series, which was canceled in 1966, by nearly 18 years. A Sunday strip also ran from April 19, 1964 to April 3, 1983. Bald retired after the cancellation of the daily strip. Franchise rights. The underlying rights to the Kildare film and television franchise are owned by Turner Entertainment via Warner Bros., with the exception of the 1937 film Internes Can't Take Money, currently owned by MCAM Limited / Universal Television, keeper of Paramount Pictures' Premise 1950 Sound Library.